Hello and welcome back to today's American Flyer trains for the continuation of the rebuild, the AC Gilbert American Flyer 322 Hudson. It is a 464 Type 2 from 1947. This session, this video, will focus on dry rub decal application tools and techniques. Before we get on to the dry rub decals, the black paint has been applied to all pieces, and that includes the pilot and the steam chest and the boiler and the tender and so forth. However, I have not painted, and I'm still debating whether or not I'm even going to paint the trailing truck or the trucks on the tender. Still just not sure if I want to go to that much effort and what I would accomplish by making those look that new. But the black is applied. Now, one of the things you may catch your eyes, it does mine and a lot of other people, is how glossy this coat is. Now, the product that I've used with success and continued success on these black pieces, both plastic and metal, is Rust-Oleum satin, and at the recommendation of another American Flyer restorer, number 7777 black, and it has worked on plastic and metal. I believe my colleague leaves these glossy for his purposes. For my purpose, I like a dull coat, so for that I've used both on plastic and metal testers dull coat. It is a product number 1260 dull coat, and this is something that you can probably find online or at large box hobby businesses, and it has worked really well in plastic and metal, but it's not the only thing. I've also used this is a Krylon matte finish. It's product number 1311 matte, and it has worked as well. However, if I were going to use this on plastic, I believe I would test it on a separate scratch plastic piece before applying it to the actual train piece. I'm going to review, before we get to the application of the dry rubs, I'm going to review just quickly the different types of marking and decal types, they being a peel-off paper, a peel-off sticker, which can be either paper or plastic, water slide decals, dry rubs, and even stamps, which I don't have any experience using and I don't plan on using, but of course I think they were in the AC Gilbert production line, but don't know a whole lot about those. Before applying any type of sticker, whether it be paper or dry rub decals, it is a good idea to clean the surface. Now this one of course is newly painted, so the cleaning was minimal, but I only took a damp paper towel just to make sure I wasn't leaving any of my own oils off my hands in this area right here before I applied this. It is going to be given a coat of dull, I'm going to use dull coat on top of it to protect it, and I've had a lot of success in doing that. With all of my decals, no matter the type, I store them in a plastic locking top box, and I put a couple of desiccant bags in, and then I sleeve the decals in plastic containers inside the box to try to cut back on the moisture or anything that could get come in contact with the decals. Now that's really important with these dry rubs, and I'll go over their nomenclature and how you receive them, but it's important they not be rubbed or allowed to be loose without their backing inside of any kind of storage, but I find this works extremely well. Okay, just to get it out of the way, one of the things you'll find on American Flyer trains are these peel and stick paper decals or labels. They also come with a plastic backing, and you've probably seen them on pieces like the 989 Northwestern boxcar has something similar to this for its own brand. This Central of Georgia car, of course. The 299 19 Missouri Pacific Alco diesels actually have their nose piece is a peel and stick. And of course, the New Haven Alcos have that peel and stick NH that goes on the front of the Alcos. Now it comes in either paper or clear plastic, and I'm going to try to show this clear plastic piece, although it will reflect a lot of light because it is a clear, high gloss piece of plastic, and there you can see the American Flyer on it. So I've tried these, but I quickly stopped using them. This clear plastic requires some careful trimming, and you have to use a very, very sharp instrument to cut it. The X-Acto knife is my preference. The edge is going to be visible when you put this down. There's no way to get around that. You're going to get that little bit of relief of the edge. It is possible to get bubbles in both of these. The relief is going to be a challenge, and it's going to be visible. As a matter of fact, you can see some of the rivets showing up right there on the side of that peel and stick paper label. Not that they won't show up on other types, but they seem to be more prominent in these. And of course, that's going to be the case with this one too. Both of these obviously use a common backing. They will not lay down individual letters, not unless you want to cut each one of them out individually and do that kind of micro trimming. They're going to have that common backing, so you're always going to have that glossy appearance. Even if you dull coat the locomotive, you're going to have that glossy appearance. Now, I've not tried dull coating this plastic at all. And of course, once you get these down, I would not count on relocating these. There's always a chance they can pull paint up if you try to peel them off. So to me, they were just too distinguishable. Yes, they put down a nice American flyer, as you can see there, that goes on the plastic, that goes on the tender. But you get that residual of the clear plastic showing up and the edge showing up. Now, everyone is probably more familiar with the good old, what I call model airplane water slide decals. They're just a glue backing and they're water activated. I keep mine in individual packages. You'll notice these are printed pretty close to one another, therefore a good sharp instrument to trim them is important. Here's a Texas and Pacific Herald that goes on the GP7s, and underneath that is one of the nose pieces on some of the locomotives, as well as the shield that appears on some of the hand cars. So those are just water slide decals. They come on that common blue backing paper that we're all familiar with. And if we built a lot of model airplanes and cars in our childhood, we certainly got used to using those. The paper does require a lot of trimming. A real sharp, I mean dangerously sharp, X-Acto knife, a cutting board, and a straight edge is needed. Now, for a cutting board, I use this 1/4 inch plexiglass, and it's just a scratch piece. In order to trim a straight line, I use a draftsman's triangle. Now, anytime you trim anything with an X-Acto knife, it's not a good idea to use something that the X-Acto knife could damage and create gaps in here such that you don't have a straight line anymore on your instrument. But I do this because I like to lay the piece down, and I'm just going to use these American Flyer logos that go on the side of a tender as an example. When I put them down, I put the triangle on top of them, and instead of pressing on the decal with my hand, I press on the triangle to hold it very, very firmly. Now, it allows me to see where the line is going to go in the trim, because I can see through the instrument that I'm using for the straight edge. Now, metal is preferred whenever you're using a sharp instrument like an X-Acto knife, but you can't see through metal. But I can see through this, and therefore I know exactly where I'm getting the line. I'm just really careful as I don't peel off or scratch the draftsman's triangle. So I don't really push up against it really hard. I just use that as a guide. And of course, the paper decals require submersion in water, and then the paper backing separation. There's no individual letters with these. It does have a common backing, so you're going to get to see that glossiness or a little bit of plastic in between the words unless you spray it down with something. The edges are going to be distinguishable. Bubbles are possible. Relief can be visible. They can be relocated quickly during application, but you've got to be pretty quick about it, so therefore they also can be straightened up. I understand there's a solvent that'll dissolve the edges and the relief. In other words, if you were to put this down on a tender that has rivets on it, that solvent will smooth out the edge lines, and it also, if you put just a little bit where there's a rivet, it will kind of like melt that plastic down, and you won't see the relief. They do get a little ugly in aging. They turn yellow. I have used dull coat on these with success, but I'm not so sure I'd recommend that for everyone. Just want to mention one other thing regarding technique on water slide decals. In order to submerge them, I simply take them, and I'm going to take this one as an example, and I'm going to assume it's already been trimmed, and I take very sharp tweezers and I hold it on one corner. I then submerge it for anywhere from 10 to 15 seconds, and then 5-second intervals after that if it's not releasing the bond. Then holding it like this and putting it lightly between my thumb and forefinger, I'll let go of the tweezers and I gently start moving it to see if I've broken the bond between the glue and the paper. As soon as that happens, I simply slide the decal just a little bit in one direction and then re-grip the paper, re-grip only the paper, leaving the decal free. And of course it'll be hanging over a little bit right here. Well, that allows me something that then I can position and hold down and then pull the paper back real slowly as the decal goes down. After the decal is applied, I take a brush, and it is just a common nylon tip, square tip, nylon tip, rather stiff brush. I wet it. I don't get it dripping wet. I just get it damp. And then I use that as a squeegee to go over the decal to get out any bubbles and to smooth it out. Now don't press down real hard. You don't want to squeegee out from under it the water that has the glue. That is going to be a little bit counterproductive. You just want to press down just enough, maybe in two directions. You could go from center to side and then come over here and do center to side. But I found this works really well to smooth these out without having to use your fingers. As far as stamping, I just do not have any experience with that. I think it looks really, really good if it's preserved. And it produces, to me, a very likable image. Clean it carefully. If you wash a car that has the stamped wording on the side or numbers, be very, very gentle with how you wash that, if you wash it at all. You might notice that some of these had heat assistance when they were applied, and therefore has actually done a little bit of damage to the plastic structure of the car. I had a 287 Pacific locomotive that was in a junk box, and that was it. It was just the shell of the boiler, nothing else. There was no numbering on the side, so I didn't know if it was a 282, a 283, a 287, a 289, or what, but I wanted to bring it back as it was originally. So somebody mentioned to put the number area under very high magnification. I used a really large, strong magnifying glass, and with that magnification, I could actually see the structuring of 2, 8, and 7 on the side of the locomotive, because it had been applied with heat-assisted stamping, and it had done just a little bit of damage to the plastic. So you may find some of those. And before we get on to the example of the dry rub and actually putting one on, again, I want to review the tools of the trade when using this. I've got the 1/4 inch plexiglass cutting board. I maintain some really, really sharp number 11 X-Acto blades, and I maintain these extremely sharp so that they cut paper decals in particular very cleanly without any jagged edges, or minimize the jagged edges. A draftsman's triangle, that is not the best item to use when trimming, but you can see through it, and you can use it to press down on the decal rather than using your finger, which might put some moisture or oil on the decal. I use narrow nose pointed tweezers to hold in particular paper decals, and I'll show you another use for them. I've already shown you that small square tip nylon, a very firm brush that I keep damp, particularly when working on water slide decals, to brush out any anomalies and try to get them as flat as possible, but don't squeegee out the glue. Draftsman's tape is preferred. I'm going to show you that I use masking tape, but I greatly prefer draftsman's tape because it doesn't have nearly the adhesion and the bonding, and therefore minimizes the risk that you could pull something up like paint. And then probably the key instrument in my dry rub decals that you'll see me use is this blunt, smooth metal, smooth tip, it's small instrument. This is nothing more than a surgical probe, but it has two edges. It has one edge right here that I can use and turn down for rubbing in a dry rub. And then it has the tip, which is smooth and rounded. Same purpose, to go down on the dry rub to remove it. Now, if you look at if you watch videos on how to apply dry rubs, you may see people using coins, especially a nickel, it seems like, because it has a smooth edge. Well, that's fine, it works, but I just don't think it's as intricate and as safe as using something like this. Now, I've also used the tip end of these tweezers because it's got a pointed surface, it's a little bit rounded, and it's fairly smooth. There's nothing on there that would cut or move the decal. These are the dry rub decals that are going to go on number 322. That includes American Flyer lines. It should include the New York Central. There they are on this side. A little hard to see the New York Central logos. These are all going to go on here. But I'm showing you this to show you that I always store this in plastic. I usually have a piece of cardboard to keep them rigid. And one of the things you want to do is to not let the backing come off. I'm going to remove one of these to show you this wax paper backing. Bear with me just a moment while I grab this. So here's the American Flyer dry rub, and here is the wax backing, which protects the dry rubs because they are applied in reverse on the common piece. And this protects them from coming off, and you want to maintain that until you're ready to use this. Now, that also makes it a little delicate to cut because when you cut this, I prefer to lay the wax paper down, put the triangle on top of that, and then cut along this long edge between the words. And it's going to be a little bit tedious. It's going to require a lot of patience and a very sharp instrument. But what I don't want to do is apply a lot of pressure or heat or friction to any of these letters because they could come off. If they did come off, I'm going to hope I can get them back on because I'm going to protect their backing with that wax paper. So it's really important to keep these as a pair, the wax paper and the decal itself. Keep it stored in a plastic sleeve, and a little piece of cardboard doesn't hurt to keep them from getting bent. It's really two things that take that dry rub off. It's the pressure and it's the heat created by the friction when you rub it with something like a metal tip. Just going around in small circles very rapidly rubs it off, creates that little bit of heat. Same thing that's going to come out of your hand, which I also use just a little bit to apply these. Some of the advantages of these is that the trimming of the individual letters is not required, but you do have to maybe separate the decal types. Like I'm going to have to separate these two lines of American Flyer lines. It does apply individual letters. It does not apply any type of common backing. So the letters are going to look like that they were applied individually. It is to a certain extent repeatable, and I'll show you what I mean by that when we actually apply one. It is compatible with dull coat, which I recommend putting on after you put them down. There's no bubbles. It is more or less relief proof. You can press these down on top of rivets. I've had success in making them look pretty good on a piece of relief on the side of a locomotive. They are tedious. They require special handling, as I've already demonstrated, a special application technique that I'll demonstrate, and of course that wax paper backing and an auxiliary piece of wax paper. But they cannot be relocated. Don't get that mixed up with repeatable, and I'll show you what I mean when we actually apply it. Before we get started with the dry rub application demonstration, this is a dry rub application and a complete restoration of these heavyweight green cars, the heavyweight 650s or New Haven 650s. The paint was completely stripped off of two of these. I believe one of them was black plastic and the other one was a tan plastic. They received a coat of primer and a coat of Portline Hobbies heavyweight green, which is available from Portline Hobbies. Then I applied the dry rub decals. Now the spacing of these letters, and even to some extent, and the spacing of the numbers, was not done individually. They were on a strip of paper. So the spacing was already done for me during the printing process. All I had to do was take them off in unison and then peel the backing off, and it left them like this. It makes them look awfully good. But see, because see, you don't see the common background between them that you would have on a water slide decal or one of those clear peel off backings on clear plastic. So you have the paint in between each of the letters. The last thing, of course, I did on this one was coat it with dull coat, and it gives it some of that really, really nice finish. I've had a lot of compliments on these heavyweight green cars. To begin the process of applying the dry rub decal, I removed it from the bag with its backing. Now it's kind of hard to see. If it isn't impossible to see the 322, there it is. You can see it. It's silver. It's going to reflect some light, so it's a little difficult to see. But what I want you to see is that the dry rub decal is on the top, and the dry rub decal, and there you can begin to see it, is on the back of this piece of paper that I'm holding up with my finger. Not on the front over here, but on the back. So you need to protect that backing, and you'll notice it has the wax paper still there. Having removed it from the bag, I'm simply going to lay it down on a non-stick, non-tacky surface, and then just hold the corner of it. I think I'll hold this side with my finger, and I'm simply going to stick a small piece of tape to the top and push the tape down. Now I would prefer to use draftsman's tape because it's a little less tacky and therefore it's less likely to cause damage to the locomotive if it pulls up paint, but all I have right now is this blue masking tape. Then all I'm going to do is pick this up and make sure that the backing falls off. And I may have to aid it in coming off. There it goes. There's the little wax paper backing. So now there's the decal. There's the back of the decal, which is where the numbers actually reside, and it's ready to be positioned on the locomotive. I brought my train cradle up to the work table, and I put a small sheet of newspaper print, which has kind of a glossy side to it, in the cradle because I don't want the paint on the locomotive nor the decal on the opposite side to touch this material, which can stick to paint, and I definitely don't want it sticking to the decal. So now let me cradle the locomotive. So the locomotive is in the cradle with the decal side down, sitting on this paper, which could be wax paper. I use newspaper print, simply to keep it from sitting on something that has some sort of tackiness to it, like the top of my workbench or even this naugahyde that's inside of my train cradle. This is a location of where the decal is going. I just need to center it there. So I'm going to pick it up by the tape that you saw just in the previous frame. I'm going to do that once again, kind of off camera. And again, be assured that the wax backing is not on it. And all I'm going to do is center the number underneath the cab's window. Now that looks pretty good. I'm going to press it down, make sure that's where I want it, and it looks like it's going toward the front just a little bit, so I'm going to remove it and reposition it. So I repositioned it just a little bit. I notice in the dry rub application process, you don't have to have tape all the way around the border of this piece that transports the numbers and holds them. I like to have only one piece on the top. Now, if I had a longer decal, maybe American Flyer lines, like I'm going to put on the boiler, the tender, I'm going to have a longer piece of thinner tape running along that top edge. And I'll demonstrate why. This is what I meant by repeatable. I'm going to start dry rubbing this on. And I mean, we could split hairs all day trying to get this number centered. And the old number was nowhere close to being centered. I'm being a little bit more picky, but don't really need to. Once I begin the dry rub process and the numbers peel off, I can take my tweezers and lift up on the paper to see how the numbers are coming off. If they all came off, well, I'm through. If they didn't, I simply push back down, and I should be able to reposition the number exactly where it was before, and then continue the dry rub process, thus not creating any, say, gaps in the numbers or anything like that. So I want to make sure this one is positioned correctly, and I think I'm ready to begin the dry rub process. Now, the dry rub process is nothing more than taking the smooth metal piece, and I hope I have this above the rivets, and making small circles. You don't have to apply a lot of pressure. The key is small, quick movements, almost like scratching movements. I finished off camera doing the circular motions like this over all the numbers, and you'll notice that the backing, or the transport piece of paper, starts to take on a little bit different appearance. It starts to take on a little bit darker appearance as it kind of uses the friction, the heat from the friction that is caused by rubbing this metal tip over the numbers to bond just a little bit with the surface, and therefore it makes that little darker backing. Now here's where using this single piece of tape up here and being able to repeat the process or continue it, I'm going to take the corner and lift up very gently from the bottom up, hopefully, and I'm going to see if the numbers are coming off. And they have. There's 322 applied. Pretty darn well centered for just a quick eyeball. Now, had any of the numbers not separated completely from the paper, simply drop this back down, check your alignment out, and you should see that you still got the right alignment to continue the rub process. Now, I like to, as a finishing part, leave the paper on and go over it with my finger back and forth, applying a little bit of soft pressure and a little bit of heat from my hand and a little bit of heat from the friction to make sure that try to ensure that they are affixed smoothly to the surface of the train without any bubbles or anything, any kind of bubble. Now, I think you can see that if you put these down on top of rivets or something like that, you'll just have to work around the rivets a little bit, but you'll find, I think, that you'll see the dry rubs bonding to the rivets as well. So I'm applying a little bit of pressure, a little bit of heat from friction, a little bit of heat from my finger, and that's the last time I'll do it. Now I'm going to lift it up. Slowly, and I believe it's bonded. Now I can just pull this off gently because here's now the tape stuck to the paint, which always makes me nervous. Therefore, it's why I like draftsman's tape a lot better. And there we have it, 322 in silver applied to the locomotive on both sides. Now I'm going to go ahead and dull coat it and show you that as a last step in the process, because before I put any of the handrails and steam piping on this piece, I want to go ahead and get the dull coat on. Not that I don't want the dull coat on the piping of the handrails, that'd be okay. It would protect it a little bit. But I just want to make sure that before I do anything that requires a lot of handling of this piece, I want to make sure that these numbers are covered with a little bit of protection. A coat of testers, number 1260 dull coat, has been applied to the boiler, and it has dried over 24 hours, probably along the lines of 36, in a controlled environment with low humidity, and left it with a very nice low gloss surface. It should help protect any dry rub decals. And it's ready for the next step. That is, the boiler is ready for the next step, and that's the application or installation of the handrails and the steam pipes. From there, it'll be the boiler front and finishing out a coating on the pilot as well as the steam chest, and we'll be getting very, very close to the assembly of the boiler. I'll then move on to the tender. It's going to get the same treatment. It's going to get the dry rubs, American Flyer lines down the side, and then up here in this smooth area, the New York Central logo. And I'm thinking about leaving the cold bed glossy, and then putting dull coat on the remainder of the tender, just to give it a different appearance, a different texture. To me, cold could be a little bit glossy and shiny, especially if it's wet. Maybe just make a little nice distinguishing feature that I've noticed on other locomotives. Thanks again for watching Dave's American Flyer Trains. So long, everyone.